Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go! As usual, we're gonna start this video from the front lines review. Let's zoom into the Torets, where Russia has some of the success moving north eastbound. However, Ukrainian army is still spotted in the central part of the town. And let's check out the timeline. So today, Russia has the small attack vector. They moved just a few meters ahead. And you know guys, it's the only change of the eastern front lines. It is crazy how slow Russia moves ahead. Moreover, Ukraine tries to gain initiative in Pokrovsk. Yes, Ukraine actually doesn't have it for now, but Russia lost it already. So I would say that situation is even now. Ukrainian army attacks in some of the points as well as the Russian side. Well, Russia recently started their attack in Zaporizhia, so we have some of the update there. Today, Russia moved ahead, taking this tree line. That's it. So just two of the points of the Russian attacks where they gained just a few hundred meters. But at the same time, they lose quite a lot. They have really heavy losses. And still they're unable to push Ukrainian army fully away from the Kursk region. So Ukraine led Russians to occupy Sudzha or retake it. Ukraine gained more ground in Belgorod Oblast and still keeps the forces in Kursk. It's crazy. And Putin says that Russian army has initiative, that the Russian army is winning, and there is the perspective for the Russian army to finish off a Ukrainian side completely, he meant. Well, that is absolute nonsense, and we see that Russia completely stalled on the front lines. And what Russia does usually if it is unable to reach its dominance on the front lines, well, the Russian army just targets Ukrainian civilians. As it happened this evening in Kryvyi Rih, you can see this is the residential area, a playground, and there were unfortunately some of the kids. Russia launched their Iskander ballistic missile, which flies very fast, and it's very difficult to intercept it, almost impossible. Plus, it is almost impossible to detect it, and that is why there are multiple of the life losses among only civilians, including children. And I cannot show many of the images with you here, my friends, but I shared it on my Telegram on X for the Western audience to understand the real face of Russia. And I also ask you to share the information about those Russian strikes, because you know, people start to forget about those strikes like it is something normal happening. But no guys, what is happening is absolute craziness. Russians are just barbarians. I mean, the Russian regime and the Russian army, they're completely inhumane. And we need to speak about it on every of the platforms. And you may post the real images of what Russia done there on platforms like Twitter, because they have low censorship. Yes, it belongs to Elon Musk, but nevertheless, it's kind of the popular platform, and we should share the information about what Russia is doing out there. Because you know, the new White House administration, they want to negotiate with Putin still, they want to make business as usual, but in fact, Russia does its terror attacks, and it's impossible to negotiate with that kind of power in Russia. So by raising this awareness, we should push American power, senators and everyone to see the real face, again I continue to say about it, the real face of Russia. Because you know, Putin's representative Dmitriev, who went to Washington and who spoke with Davydov, he says that United States companies are ready to enter Russian market instead of European businesses. And the work is underway to restore the direct air traffic communication between Russia and United States of America. What is happening, guys? America has a terrorist regime of Russia as a friend. And also he says that a significant progress has been made in talks in Washington on ceasefire agreement in Ukraine. Well, no other details have been provided about the conversation between Dmitriev and Davydov, but we understand the reaction of the United States of America, that they haven't applied any sort of the extra tariffs on Russia, unlike what they do to Ukraine. No extra sanctions against Russia are out there, despite Putin's inability actually to ceasefire and negotiate. And moreover, they speak about making business as usual. I don't have words to describe that, my friends. It is craziness. Who came to power in the United States of America? It's the shame. It's the shame for America itself and for entire world. This reaction, it is crazy. Meanwhile, Russian RIA Novosti says that they've hit the armed forces of Ukraine, no civilians, saying that 85 of the Ukrainian soldiers were zeroed by their Iskander, which is complete lies. So what you might do, guys, is to report the information from any sort of the source about what Russia calls today the death toll from the Russians' ballistic missile attack or residential neighborhood. So I repost that, I repost this, press the like here, doesn't matter who really reposts or publishes those news. Just make sure that it is not the Russian propaganda. And by doing so, we spread the message about what is happening in reality. And Trump plus Elon Musk, they start to scream free Le Pen, who spreads the Russian narratives, and they try to intervene into internal affairs of France because Le Pen is like them. She promised to be a far-right dictator. That is what they like. Well, I just hope that they will scream someday, free Putin, please. During his interview to BBC, the father of Elon Musk admitted that his family, including Elon Musk himself, respect Putin as a strong leader. Responded that only over time will it become clear who really started it. He means the war. And just to remind you, Donald Trump once already accused Ukraine for starting the war. And he also accused Ukraine for resisting against the superpower of Russia. So guys, they live in their own informational bubble, which has nothing to do with what is happening in real life. Also, father of Elon says that Putin is the trusted person, so he might be trusted, but history shows completely different picture. I'm telling you about this just for you to understand who is really ruling America now, what views do they have. Guys, you may ask me of what is happening on the front lines. Well, I have some of the images from the front lines, but I need to classify everything of that to determine the location too, so it takes a while to comment everything of that, but we can clearly see, for example, here is the Russian MTLB, which was annihilated by the drone. So usual stuff out there is happening on the front lines. Drones do their perfect job. I review all of those videos with more details on my Rumble channel, and I also post that stuff on Twitter. Yeah, you may not like those platforms, but they have very low censorship because YouTube, well, I have some of the problems with monetization there. And thank you, by the way, for your kind support on Patreon. You keep me running, my friends, because yeah, only because of you and some of the sponsors I'm able to post videos almost daily. Yeah, after all, YouTubing is my full-time job, so thank you again for your kind support. Yeah, actually 2 of the MTLBs were hit out there. It is happening in Sumy region. So Russians entered Sumy. They tried to gain more ground, but you can see unsuccessfully. And those losses we have, judging on the images coming from the front lines, mostly from the drones, and those are just for a single day. Here Ukraine loses quite a lot of the tanks, unfortunately. But Russia at the same time lost many of the artillery systems and Tupolev Tu-22M3. Kind of the strange day, because usually Russia loses way more vehicles compared to Ukrainian side. Well, maybe Ukraine down some of the attack operation, because during the attack you lose usually more vehicles. Yeah, those losses, I would admit, for a single day, quite unusual. But if you check out like the bigger picture with all of the supply vehicles and so on, Russia has more of the losses. It is clearly visible. The losses are for the 4th of April, but unfortunately the loss of the tanks, Ukrainian tanks, have been confirmed. You may see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tanks were destroyed, so Russia is also effective with their FPV drones. But for Russia, you can see that they lose lots of the vehicles and many of the Bukhanka, so LOV vans. Mostly Ukraine hits the Russian logistics. And about the Russian convoy attack, well, we have the bigger video. I already posted it on my Telegram channel, but you know already the result. There were a couple of the Russian tanks, some of the BMPs, KAMAZ supply vehicle, all of them were kaboomed, plus infantry around. There are just few of the Russian soldiers who escaped this hell on earth. And this video I'm taking from the Russian channels. Donkeys are still out there on the front lines. Moreover, they have some special places for them to be stored for the Russian army. It is crazy. Well, you know, there is the combination of the Russian armored vehicles and those small supply vehicles and donkeys which they use. In a way, it could be even effective if you speak about small companies, but Ukraine is forced to drop some of the strikes on them, which is bad. But Ukraine is not to blame for, because Russians took those donkeys to the front lines and they carried their ammunition on donkeys. Yeah, it is very sad. Marco Rubio said that in a few weeks we're gonna see if Russia definitely wants to end the war. Well, I'm not the extrasense or something, and I don't have connections in intelligence, but if Putin says that he wants to finish Ukraine off, it means that he is not interested in ceasefire or end of the war. And we see how America are really afraid to implement some of the force solutions against Russia, new sanctions or supply more weaponry to Ukraine. Do you think this policy might change in a few weeks? I don't think so. Well, Zelensky says that the United States of America is considering some of the actions to force Russia for peace. Well, I guess he has more information, and I just hope that Zelensky is right, because judging on Trump's rhetorics for Russia, it seems like he is not really interested to push Russia hard. Well, the only option for the United States of America is to supply Ukraine with more weaponry to reinforce Ukraine, to make the advancements for Russia absolutely impossible on Ukrainian front lines, so Putin will just burn his army men for no reason, without any use, and in a while it would lead to the crisis in Russia itself. I guess that's the only option how this war could be ended. Well, you may compare it to Afghanistan for the Soviet Union. I think like that. But pushing Ukraine is absolutely no-go strategy from the White House that we saw before. Well, luckily for us, the United States are out of the tools really to push Ukraine hard or to change the Ukrainian government, for example, which Putin, by the way, wants. It seems like Donald Trump, after all, came to the conclusion that Zelensky is quite popular in Ukraine, and changing him is not a good variant because it is totally unachievable. You know, guys, probably I'm gonna post less and less of those kind of the statements of Donald Trump, because, you know, those screaming messages with caps lock, they're just annoying, and they're just useless in most of the cases. He's just there to scream, to show that he is the best out there, but in fact he's a psychopath with huge power. And now, guys, I think that Rubio is already tired. Just look at his expression. He understands, I think, what is really happening. He's just in the wrong company, but he's there for his career, so in a way he sold his soul. So I don't think that he will stay in the team for extended period of time. Well, at least 1 year, yes, but after it probably he'll quit himself or Donald Trump will kick him off. And by the way, Rubio said that Russian forces violated the ceasefire several of the times. Well, in fact, that ceasefire hasn't even been achieved. Well, the only good thing about Trump's tariffs that the oil plunged down, as well as the stock markets and cryptocurrency. For the last couple of days it went from almost $73 per barrel to $64, so the loss is quite high. And this is the price of the Brent oil. If we speak about the Russian Urals, it is even cheaper. The Russian oil Urals trade somewhere between $55 and $53. So definitely it's the big strike on the Russian budget. That's the only profit we see from those tariffs applied on the countries. And by the way, we all saw those first figures, like countries which applied tariffs on the United States products. This is absolute fake. Here they just presented the difference between export and import to particular country divided by 2, and they call it tariffs. But it has nothing to do with tariffs. The real tariffs are applied by the United States of America. By the way, China already responded with 34% of the tariffs on the United States produced goods. So the trade war is on a full scale, and the European Union response is also coming. So what's the great job and what numbers are far better than expected? Guys, it is absolute craziness. It will not bring profit for anyone out there. The American economy will be in a deep shit if that circus continues. Yeah, I'm sorry for my pessimistic view, but I say the things as they are. Or at least as I see them. Alright, it seems like Poland is the first country to increase its military budget up to 5% of GDP. It will happen the next year. I mean the first country from all of the NATO countries. Ukraine spends 25 or up to 27% of GDP for its military, but the Ukrainian economy is really suffering, and the rest of the funds are going mostly for the social sector. And luckily, allies are still helping Ukraine. But from EU countries and NATO, Poland has its first big achievement. And yes, they have to take about their army because Russia is very close. And yes, Rubio also called to increase the spending up to 5% of GDP to all of the NATO alliance members, but the United States itself spends 2.5% of GDP for its military. Just GDP itself is very big in the United States of America, and just imagine for the United States to spend 2 times more for its army. It is crazy. Yeah, sorry guys for this kind of the clumsy video today, because I'm not really in the mood because of this Russian strike and Kryvyi Rih. It is just terrible. And yes, I have to review many of the stories, but sometimes I just knocked off by the news, terrible news coming from Ukraine. It is just terrible. And guys, I hope it will never happen to you, to your families, that will have finally a peaceful sky. Don't forget to press the like to this video. Ciao.